Hi, my name's Edana Kiernan. I'm the broker and owner of Vintage American Realty in New York. Today I'm going to be filming the first video in a series of how-to videos, and today is going to be how to fill out the agency disclosure form properly, which is probably the most important thing for a new agent to learn and one of the first things they should learn. Definitely one of the basics. State disclosure form for both buyers and sellers. Note that it is different for sales and rentals, so make sure you have a sales form. Assuming that everybody already understands what a seller's agent, buyer's agent, and broker's agent is, I will get into dual agency with this video. We are going to go down to the second page. Your agency disclosure is 2 pages. Make sure you always have both pages to give to your clients, as well as when you upload into whatever platform your brokerage uses. So the first line is obviously going to be your name, the licensee. Always make sure that your name is the same as is indicated on your real estate license. The second line will be your brokerage. So these 2 things should pretty much always be pre-filled out. You should have it saved this way because you're most likely, unless you own your brokerage, going to be only filling out your own. So first, to represent a buyer, to fill out this form, you're going to be checking off that you work for the buyer as a buyer's agent. You will very rarely work as a broker's agent. A broker's agent doesn't really have a relationship with the client or the customer. They are just really working on behalf of another agent. It's an agent that does not work at the listing agent or the buyer's agent's firm. So I'm not really going to go into the broker's agent right now because it's very rarely are you ever going to fill that out. So you have a buyer and you're working in their best interest. You are their agent. You're going to be filling this out by checking that you work for the buyer as a buyer's agent. Dual agency is when you are representing both the seller and the buyer. It's really important to note that dual agency, you're not a dual agent just because you have the seller and the buyer is unrepresented. So for example, you are holding an open house, you have the seller, you are a seller's agent, and someone walks into the open house that you don't know and they want to place an offer with you and they do not have an agent. I have found that a lot of agents think that that automatically means dual agency. That is not a dual agent. A dual agent is someone who is representing both sides and was supposed to be working in the best interest of either side. So they were supposed to be working in the best interest of the seller as the listing agent, and they have a buyer that they were supposed to be working in the best interest of, but now your buyer has come and seen this listing you have and they want to purchase it. Or if your sister or best friend wants to purchase it, you can't really work. You have a personal relationship with them, so you would by default also be a buyer's agent. So I'll get more into how to fill out dual agency later, but for the purposes of just filling this out right now, you work as a buyer's agent. You take your buyer to go see a listing. This is how you will fill it out. You will check off that you work for the buyer as a buyer's agent. You will not need to fill out any dual agency if you're only representing the buyer, unless your firm is holding the listing. But if your firm is not holding the listing, you can go on. Advanced informed consent to dual agency, again, doesn't apply right now. And because we're not doing dual agency, this doesn't apply either. So the next thing you're going to go to is you're going to fill out your buyer's name right here. Buyer 1 and buyer 2's name. So buyer's name. So if you have one buyer, you can put their name, John Smith. If you have a husband and wife, for example, you can put John. We can put John and Jane Smith right here. So John and Jane Smith. Again, check off that this is going to be the signature of the buyers, and then you're going to have your buyer's sign down there. So if someone is a very visual learner, I'll put Jane Smith's signature, buyer signature. I don't know if that's clear enough, so signature, and then oh goodness, sorry about that. And then, if there's 2 of them, you're going to put John Smith, buyer signature. And then make sure the date is at the bottom, have them date it. This is just extra. So this would be a fully filled out agency disclosure. Once you place an offer, if it gets accepted or however it works out, you would keep this on file. This is a fully filled out agency disclosure for your buyers. Now, moving on to seller. So you have a listing and you are the listing agent. Let's clear the form. When you take a listing, you're going to be working for the seller. So we will check off seller as a seller's agent. And again, I'm not really going to get into broker's agents because it's just so rare, and you will 99 out of 100 times be filling it out like this. So you work for the seller as a seller's agent. Now, if it's anticipated that someone in your brokerage or you yourself might have a buyer that you think would be purchasing this property, you can get advanced informed consent to dual agency. So you would tell the seller, I have a few buyers, or my brokerage has a few buyers that I really think would be interested in buying this. If you're okay with me representing both of you, or it being someone else from my brokerage, can we agree to sign this now for advanced informed consent to dual agency? Usually they'll say yes. I've never really had anybody have a problem with it, but it is important to let them know that because of this, especially if you are representing both sides, that you cannot have full fiduciary duties to both sides. So you cannot possibly be working in their complete both best interest, because you're not able to disclose everything to either side. But again, as long as you're being honest and fair, it works out just fine. So for the sellers to agree to that, you can check off advanced informed consent to dual agency. If you check it off in this way, they're agreeing to allow you to be a dual agent for them and your buyer. If that's the case, you don't need to fill out any names here, because this is when they're designating a different agent. So say you have the buyer, you anticipate to have the buyer, you already have the seller, you would fill it out just like this. We would have seller's names printed here, and then seller's signature. So seller one signature. I don't know if everybody else has as many typos as me as they type, but it's pretty bad. And seller two signature. And again, this would be filled out. This would be fully filled out as it is. Now, should a buyer come along and you do have this advanced informed consent to dual agency, you're still covered. You would just now need to have your buyer sign something that now says that you are a dual agent. So you can do a separate form for them, check off that you are working as a dual agent, and then it wouldn't be advanced consent because it would be happening at the time. And then you would have your buyer's names placed here. Now, say the sellers are okay with it being dual agency, but they would like you to designate another agent from your brokerage. You can do advanced informed consent to dual agency with designated sales agents. So it's important to note that a broker owner or a office manager cannot be a designated sales agent. It has to be two separate agents in the brokerage. So if a dual agent with, as it says here, if a dual agent with designated sales agents is indicated above, you can put your name here. If you, actually you'd be more likely to retain as the seller. So you can put your name here that you're appointed to represent the seller. And then you can add another line here that indicates the buyer's name. I'm sorry, the buyer's agent's name, the designated agent from your brokerage that is supposed to be the buyer's agent. So we will put agent number 2 from brokerage. And then you would have the seller's sign here, the seller's names here. So seller's names printed. And then, I guess I didn't have to delete that before, but I just want to make sure I show you guys correctly. Seller 1 signature, and obviously if there is only one seller, you will only be needing 1 signature. And then seller 2 signature, and always remember to check off who is actually signing. So this is filled out. You have advanced informed consent to dual agency with designated sales agents. So in this case, you would both be from the same brokerage, but the sellers are okay with you representing them and just another agent from your brokerage representing the buyer. Now, if you did not do the prior consent, you would just fill out, I would keep the original form that you have. If you had your sellers sign a form that says seller as a seller's agent, I would keep the original form to show that you did have it signed when you were first working with them. But then you can just fill out another form that says that you're working as a dual agent. And when you do that, you can have everybody sign the same form. You're working as a dual agent. If you're working both sides and you don't need a designated sales agent, you can, you can have both sides sign the signature. So we can do seller's signature on this side and make sure everybody dates it, and then we can do buyer's signature on this side. And we can add buyer and seller's names here. Buyer name, and then you can even just add the seller's name. And put like an and sign and seller name. And then they can actually sign the same form. If you don't have them sign the same form, it's actually not a huge deal. You can have two different forms, each signed by them, as long as it says that you are working as a dual agent. And in which case, you don't even need that. And again, if it's working with a dual agent with designated sales agent, and this happens later in the transaction, you can simply just click, you can just check there, and you can have agent one's name here, agent one from brokerage. Actually, we'll call this person agent two from brokerage. And then it will be your name here. And I'm just going to put my name to try to keep things consistent, and I hope I'm not confusing anybody. And then the last thing, just make sure you have a date here. Always make sure everything is dated. And again, keep your original forms just to show that you did have everybody sign originally, and if things change, you just have another form, and keep both on file. I keep so many documents at my brokerage because I just want to be super careful with my document compliance. Okay, so we went over how to fill it out for a seller, we went over how to fill it out for a buyer, we went over dual agency. The last thing that I want to show you is, if you remember me telling you that just because someone walks into an open house and places an offer on your listing doesn't mean that you're a dual agent. So how do you fill that out? If you have a listing, how do we fill it out? We are working for the seller as a seller's agent. Then, like I said, someone from an open house walks in and wants to place an offer, or even if it's not an open house, if someone just calls you on a listing they're unrepresented and they just want to put their offer in through you, you're going to have them sign it just like this. So this is an agency disclosure form. You are just disclosing who you work for, who you working on behalf. So just because the buyer comes along doesn't mean that you're going to suddenly check that you're working for the buyer as a buyer's agent, because you are not their agent. You are working for the seller, and you have a fiduciary duty to the seller. You do not have fiduciary duty to the buyer. So they're going to sign it just like this. The only difference is going to be that you're working for the seller as a seller's agent. The only difference is going to be that this is going to be the signature of the buyer. Just make sure that you check off that that's the signature of the buyer, and make sure that you put the buyer's names here. So buyer's names, because we want to make sure that if your documents get audited, that New York State knows that you provided this form to the buyers, made it clear that you work for the seller, and the buyer's names are here, and the buyers will sign here, buyer's signatures. And again, just make sure you date everything. And this is all filled out and correct. So I think that is basically all we need to go over for agency disclosure and filling out this form. I hope it was clear. If you do have any questions about it, feel free to leave a comment. You can always reach me via email. My email address is info@vintageamericanrealty.com or edana@vintageamericanrealty.com, EDANA. And I hope this was helpful. Thanks.